So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the mock sign-in trade that would land Kelly Oubre Jr. on the Houston Rockets. And this trade would definitely be beneficial for both sides, which is including the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. But with that being said, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And also hit that notification bell button not to miss out on more awesome NBA content like this. But with that all out of the way, now let's get into the video. So this season has been very weird for the Golden State Warriors and very different with the absence of Klay Thompson, but they're also in a very awkward financial situation right now. And they're not only supposed to pay all of their luxury tax, but they're projected to be over $50 million over the cap space for this summer. But the good news for them is that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, and James Wiseman are all under contract for next season. But Kelly Oubre is set to become an unrestricted free agent this summer, and the Warriors are basically not going to have enough money to sign any high-level talents this offseason. And Kelly Oubre Jr. does not look like he wants to stay with the Golden State Warriors, nor do the Warriors really want to have him next season, since it just does not look like it's a great on-court fit for the Warriors team. And maybe making a sign-in trade for a player that's a bit inconsistent at times at Kelly Oubre Jr. would be beneficial for the Warriors and Kelly Oubre Jr. long-term. And even though he is going to be a free agent this summer, the Warriors could definitely execute a sign-and trade deal with Oubre Jr. And in this trade, not only do the Warriors get another high-level experienced player, but they also get a fairly large trade exception that they can use at the trade deadline next season. So with that all being said, let's look at the actual mock trade and see if this makes sense for both teams. So in this potential mock sign-in trade, the Golden State Warriors would receive Eric Gordon, while the Houston Rockets would receive Kelly Oubre Jr. So that is straight up the trade, as the Rockets would receive Kelly Oubre and the Warriors would receive an experienced veteran in Eric Gordon. And this is assuming that the Rockets would be willing to take on Kelly Oubre Jr.'s contract, which would be worth around $12 to $15 million per year, which definitely is not a bad contract and could result into being a potential steal of a contract. First, let's talk about the Rockets side of this trade. So the Houston Rockets this year are going to get a very good draft pick and a top draft pick this year, which could result into a player like Cade Cunningham. And just imagine how fun of a team this would be and how fun of a starting five lineup this would be, with Cade Cunningham at the point guard position, as well as the shooting guard being Kevin Porter Jr. And at the small forward position, it would be Kelly Oubre Jr. And of course, at the power forward position, it would be Christian Wood and Kelly Olynyk at the center position. I mean, that would probably be, in my opinion, the most fun young team to watch in the NBA. And Kelly Oubre Jr. is still only 25 years old and still has massive upside to his game, as during this 2020-2021 NBA season, he's currently averaging about 16 points, 6 rebounds, and about a steal and a block per game. And in this trade, this is probably a no-brainer move for the Houston Rockets, since they would still keep stacking up on young assets and high upside type of young players, and they would develop them the right way, as they did with Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood, by playing them a ton of minutes. And in this trade, they would get rid of Eric Gordon's large salary, and even though Eric Gordon is still a great player, he's definitely not in the timeline that the Rockets are in right now with their full-on rebuild that they have. And with players like Jayshawn Tate and Kenyon Martin Jr. off the bench, the Rockets would be a deadly young team that would build with around themselves in the future. And this would allow to keep Christian Wood happy and stay long-term in Houston, especially with both the potential acquisition of Kelly Oubre Jr. as well as a very high draft lottery pick that could turn out to a serious franchise-changing player such as Jalen Suggs or Cade Cunningham. And in 3 years or so, the Houston Rockets could be a legitimate playoff contender in the Western Conference. And Kelly Oubre Jr. is a very solid defender, as well as him being a very gifted scorer on the offensive side of the court, and overall a very energetic player player for his team. And the Rockets are basically giving up nothing in return, which is why they definitely should pull off this trade if it is in terms of getting a young, great player in Kelly Oubre. And just imagine two lefties in Kevin Porter Jr. and Kelly Oubre Jr. on one team together. I mean, that itself is a great thing for the NBA, and I definitely tune in to watch Rockets game every night with a potential starting five of Kevin Porter Jr., Cade Cunningham, Kelly Oubre Jr., Jayshawn Tate, and Christian Wood. But with that all being said, now let's hop into the Golden State Warriors side of this trade. So with this trade, the Warriors would definitely not regret trading a player like Kelly Oubre Jr. And losing Kelly Oubre Jr. would definitely not really hurt them, especially if it means trading him and his contract away for a player like Eric Gordon, which is a high-level, experienced veteran player. And at age 32, he could still be a seriously good scoring boost for the Warriors off the bench. And even if it means being on the starting lineup, they would definitely benefit off of Eric Gordon a ton. As during the 2020-2021 NBA season, for the Houston Rockets, Eric Gordon has been averaging about 18 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, and shooting 43% from the field and also 83% from the free throw line. And since the Warriors have been willing to pay a ton of money in exchange for a potential championship run for the past few seasons, they would definitely not mind to do this the same way for Eric Gordon. And especially with the return of Klay Thompson, the Warriors could definitely benefit the boost of Eric Gordon for another scoring player. And Eric Gordon clearly fits their championship mindset and their timeline. And the main reason that this trade makes sense for the Golden State Warriors as well is that they do not give up any assets in return for Eric Gordon, which does make sense with a young player that they give up in Kelly Oubre Jr. And with that all being said, they should definitely pursue a trade for Eric Gordon, since they will not be able to sign anyone clearly this offseason. And they get rid of a player in Kelly Oubre Jr. that has been very inconsistent for this team so far. And they clearly can't afford taking on a young player that is inconsistent, and rather would like a consistent veteran player that matches the needs of this Warriors team and would make Steph Curry and Klay Thompson happy. And that is exactly what Eric Gordon would bring to the table. But if the Warriors organization still feels like it's not enough in order to land a championship for the roster, they could definitely look into making more potential sign-and-trade deals, including Andrew Wiggins and their picks for a player that can all-star player. And that player could, and I'm just saying could, result into DeMar DeRozan or potentially Kawhi Leonard in an extreme case scenario. So with all of that being said, let me know in the comments down below, which team do you think ultimately would win this trade in the long-term future? And do you believe that this trade is enough for the Warriors to be able to compete for a championship in the following few seasons? With a fully healthy squad of Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and James Wiseman, as well as their potential sixth-man player in Eric Gordon. And with that being said, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you did enjoy. It was KYT here, and I'm out. Peace.